as happens when these things happen, I come, and I haven't been to a conference that was focused on literature before, and I'm like, oh, I have to change everything. Well, not everything, but so I've rearranged a little bit of my talk. So I want to start with a story. It's called The Art of Marcus. This is the first part. Marcus drew on everything. Napkins, worksheets, even his arms. At 8 years old, his sketches of dragons and robots covered every margin of his homework. His art was so good that his mother, Jane, kept a folder labeled Marcus's masterpieces. Then one Tuesday, in October, he stopped. His teacher, Ms. Williams, had implemented a new focus system. No doodling, no choosing seats or partners to work with, lots of lectures followed by worksheets, one after another. This is how we'll succeed on the state test. But Thursday, Marcus hadn't drawn a single line. And by Friday, he wasn't solving basic math problems that he previously had done. And then one day, Jane found him curled up in his closet, homework crumpled beside him. "I'm stupid," he declared. Jane called for an emergency conference. Ms. Williams put Marcus's test scores on the desk. "He's falling behind. He won't focus." Jane pulled an even bigger report out of her purse and slammed it on the desk. "This is from his pediatrician. Marcus has lost 4 pounds in 2 weeks. He's not eating lunch. He complains of stomach aches every morning." "What? But that..." Mrs. Williams stumbled over her words. Jane held up her hand. "Not really. But if you were starving him of food, this school would be shut down in a hot second. And I think you are starving him of something just as essential." And we'll pause the story there. Notice that Marcus's teacher is trying to achieve academic rigor, according to the way her state is trying to ensure that children are getting it. When a schooling system imposes rigorous discipline, independent of how children react to those impositions, it creates a problem. Now, Ms. Williams is undoubtedly a very well-meaning professional. And Marcus is a very well-meaning little boy. But he's playful and he's artistic. And those two worlds are colliding. So how is it even possible to reconcile Ms. Williams' professionalism with Marcus's playfulness? So, actually we're going to go to the other slide. So what you're about to see is, well, it's this. The top half on the handout, in black and white. And this is from a study done in the US, but I think the pattern is probably similar everywhere. Essentially, what you're looking at are patterns of engagement that have been found. So this is for primary age, 8 to 11-year-olds, so later primary, and then secondary school. And the key thing is, look how many, even at the young age, and people often think of, well, when they're little, they're engaged in everything, and they're excited to be there. Not entirely true. Partly true, yeah, more than before, but there's still this 5% who are in what's called resistor mode. I'll talk about what those mean in a moment. But the thing that is most disturbing to me, it should be disturbing to all, is notice the disengaged goes from 30% to 65%. By the end there, it's gotten really bad. And what I think is underappreciated is that engagement isn't optional. Engagement isn't an add-on. Fundamentally, all of the children in this disengaged category are not being educated. Now, one of the things to know about engagement is that it changes from moment to moment. It changes, they may be more engaged in some classes than others. And so this is a very rough measure. Some of those kids are engaged some of the time. Probably all of them are somewhat engaged some of the time, but these guys, probably very little. Because they've realized that this thing, school, is a threat or an imposition, and maybe something that they're just not willing to be part of. So at this older age, one thing is that this number cannot be recording the ones who were so resistant they left the school. You had to be in school in order to be measured on this measure. Now those probably capture most of the kids because people don't drop out usually until later grades. This one means that this is underreporting the reality. So this comes I'm a psychologist. My degree's in psychology. I'm not clinical, just research. And so this is just a fact we can think about, but how should we understand it? So professionalism, educational professionalism, is about rigorous academics. Now it's going to look different, certainly in younger ages, and we can see we're learning about some opportunities here that are fantastic. But my suspicion is that most of the opportunities that we're presenting about aren't going to reflect this same pattern because they're probably opted into to some degree. They're a change from the routine, and the way that we operate is at choice, at giving them an opportunity and listening to their voice. So we've already set up a system, an opportunity that's not going to involve much resistance because we figured it out. There's some ways this happens. What I'm bringing to you is to say there's a science that already says why these things work. And the key to understanding this level of disengagement is that what I suggest is that the dominant power structure in mainstream schools the world over creates conflicts and fails to resolve them. The place we're aiming is not about not having conflict, because that's not being alive. Life brings conflict. The question is, what do you do with it? And how do we move on when we have it? Okay. Let me finish the story and then I'll... So coming back to the story, we're in the emergency meeting. The principal, Mr. Torres, had been in the background of our emergency meeting with Ms. Williams, Marcus, and Marcus's mom. He was listening from near the doorway. He had just returned from a conference on self-determination theory. Ms. Williams, I might have something relevant to offer. He steps in between Marcus and Ms. Williams and kneels down, saying, Marcus, if you could learn math in any way you wanted, how would you do it? Marcus's eyes kind of flicker. He says, could I draw the problems? Like make numbers into characters? And he says, show me. Marcus grabs a pencil. He draws a wizard, 2 goblin warriors and an orc. He says that the wizard needed an army of 10 to defend his camp, so he would need 7 more warriors. The math was correct. More importantly, Marcus was smiling. Mr. Torres turned to Ms. Williams. When we took custody of Marcus at 8:15 this morning, we took responsibility for all his needs, not just keeping him physically safe, but psychologically alive. He needs to make choices, to connect with others, and to feel capable. That's not optional. That's our duty of care. But what about his test scores? Ms. Williams replies. They will improve when Marcus can think clearly again. You just wait and see. And over the next month, Ms. Williams, reluctantly, let students choose learning partners and pick from different problem-solving methods and, yes, draw in the margins. Test scores rose as predicted, and Mr. Torres found something new to keep on his desk, a new dragon Marcus had drawn, breathing mathematical fire across a worksheet full of correct answers. Below it, Marcus had written, Math Wizard Level Expert. He was so inspired by Marcus' turnaround that he lobbied the district to require all teachers to complete training on psychological needs. They call it the Marcus Protocol. Because parents watching their child's creativity dry up and blow away is not okay. The end. Now, to conclude, I want to talk about freedom because we need to figure out, in the story, actually with the help of AI, this story, because I'm not this kind of writer, so I had a little help. But of course, I edited heavily to make it work. I used the story to really create a very compact version of the transformation. It's not realistic in that sense. The transformation will take longer, and even the process of getting him to shut down takes time. It is not just automatic. But freedom is the key to reconciling this problem of professionalism and playfulness. So consider the possibility that the ultimate source of both playfulness and professionalism are the same. And therefore, there's no actual inherent conflict between them. Something else is interfering. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but humans ultimately want to live good lives, surrounded by beauty, governed by honest and trustworthy folks who help everyone to experience the joys of living well. I think that's pretty universal. Not always achieved. Maybe not nearly enough. But humans yearn for this kind of freedom, the freedom to create this world. And they are going to pursue that goal, this kind of goal, even though there are personal and cultural variations that such that achieving it can look many, many different ways. Everyone's going to have their own version of it. So this is pertinent to schooling because an educated person, this is my definition of what an educated person is, someone who perceives accurately, thinks clearly, acts effectively on self-selected goals and aspirations that are appropriate to their situation without necessarily knowing that any of that's actually going on. So being educated is fundamentally necessary to freedom. So in this way, if you're not thinking clearly, perceiving accurately, acting effectively, then those two things have to go together. So if schools cause a child to perceive less accurately, muddles their thinking, inhibits their ability to act effectively, or imposes arbitrary goals that the school itself is undermining that child's freedom. Okay? So based on this way of thinking about an educated person, if schools precisely define freedom using scientific insights, which we'll get into in a moment, they can become orders of magnitude better at creating the right conditions to create the goodness, truth, beauty, and joy that we all want. Now, then we have to ask the proper role of schooling in educating children. If imposing academic rigor is a problem, how do we reconcile that professionalism with playfulness? And the conundrum comes from the word imposed. Schools are usually organized to impose academic rigor on children, on students of any age, actually. But with a proper psychological perspective, we can resolve this false dilemma. So self-determination theory, that's a psychological theory that I work with. It's been around for over 50 years, or 40 or 50 years, somewhere in that range. And its fundamental insight is that how our universal human needs shape our motivations, which in turn shape our engagement with the activities we have available. So a proper understanding of SDT implies that playfulness and professionalism have the same root causes, which are the satisfaction of those needs. Now, the reason it switches is that what happens with playfulness is that the children are exploring, and what happens is over time they take on cultural, cultural content, cultural knowledge, cultural traditions that then point them in a place in their society. In the case of teaching, it points them into what does it mean to be a teacher. But if the teacher is just doing the same thing, perceiving accurately, thinking clearly, acting effectively, on those goals and aspirations that they adopted by being a teacher. Their professionalism is founded in that. Same thing. The playfulness and the professionalism have the same ultimate source. So when we look at how do we shift this and resolve this conflict, we need to focus on how those needs are being thwarted or supported or otherwise. Okay, so the nature of being human inherently determined by what we require to have well-being. This means a rigorous model of human needs provided by SDT necessarily gives insights into human nature. And what I'm going to do is, let's see if we can switch this back. Oh, and by the way, that QR code is to that handout. And the handout has the QR code on it too, just in case you need it, if anybody didn't want to take the paper or whatever. You'll notice that this is the highest and this is the lowest on the other thing. So what you're looking at is who owns the goal. If the student, the teacher are owning their own goals, that's the desirable side. If others are not, then that's more problematic, especially when you get to resistor mode. So I wanted you to understand that. And when we get to deeper levels of engagement, these are the same, just the owner of the goal is opposite. And this is when the reason they look like a resistor, because they're pursuing, without knowing it, the same needs. They're pursuing their autonomy. They're pursuing relatedness, but they're not getting it in the environment they're in, so they're effectively resisting it. So there is a psychological model that can really build on this. And in the handout, on the third page, goes into what those needs are. And I'm not going to go over the handout. That's why I have a handout. And on the second page is a series of statements that are all about how this is constructed and how we need to be thinking about education from some basic first principles about what the duty of care that schools and teachers have based on this science of self-determination theory, and fundamentally what does it mean for humans to have these needs in order to realize the freedoms that we want can actually deliver the goodness, truth, beauty, and joy that we all ultimately are aiming for. And schools can provide that, and teachers can realize it. That's it. Thank you.